I knew that when I would get my own place, one of the first things I would want to do would be to wire Ethernet throughout the house. I know Wi-Fi is getting better and faster, but I kind of always preferred some of my network devices to be hardwired. Also, for data safety reasons, I'm going to have the NAS, which backups all my data, and my main work computer. They're going to live in different rooms. In order for the backup to not take forever, I want to have a 10 gigabit backbone. But first I needed internet access. A word of caution, in these videos I'm probably going to do a lot of things wrong. Be mindful that this is, as the title says, what not to do when running network cables.
The plan is to put a network cabinet in the space under the stairs. That's where the internet would come into the house. But since I don't want to put my desk in the kitchen, I had to run network cables from the kitchen to the living room. Thankfully, the location I had in mind for the network plugs was just on the other side of the wall separating the two rooms. So it would be just a matter of punching straight through the wall, or so I thought. The hole that you can see at the bottom was drilled by the previous owner to run satellite cable. I am not subscribed to Sky and don't intend to be, so I didn't need those cables and remove them. However, in the spirit of future-proofing, the initial plan was to reroute the satellite cable to another back box and leave some blanks in case I decided to relocate the aerial socket. Therefore, I was planning on getting two gang back boxes. I'm using 47mm deep back boxes as I wanted the sockets to be flush with the faceplate, and internal keystone jacks do take a bit of space. I measured the space between the two to know how much gap I needed between the back boxes. I started measuring the height on both sides to make sure I wouldn't hit the exposed power cable. I went with the 45cm height that they recommend in the more recent electrical regulations, though I don't think I actually needed to comply with these, as this won't be for high power cables. I placed the back box on the wall, using a level to ensure that the box was, well, level, and traced around it to get an outline of the box. By the way, I highly recommend those magnetic levels. They're really handy for that kind of work. This was already my first mistake. I traced way too close to the back boxes, which is going to be a source of pain later on. Then I scored the wall along the markings with a utility knife to prevent the plaster from cracking too much around it when I chiseled it out. I thought I would get a cleaner cut if I started with the hand chisel first. While the result wasn't perfect, I think it was a lot cleaner than it would have been if I had taken the hammer drill straight to the wall. The hammer drill I'm using was a bit overkill for my use, but I needed one that could fit a 25mm drill bit. I used the classic masking tape technique to know how far into the wall I would need to go, and then started drilling. To get used to the tool, I would start by drilling with drill only action, and then once I got comfortable with it, I switched to the drill and hammer action in order to get through the brick wall. I used to make fun of my American friends for having houses where the walls are made of wood, plaster and air, but the brick walls in my house made me eat my words.
Holy shit!
I think at this point I realized how dusty the drilling was and how it had got all over my camera. The recommended process is to pepper the wall with holes so that when you take the chisel to it, chunks will fall off more easily.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
When drilling that corner hole, I felt it went way too easily, and I fortunately had the reflex to immediately stop drilling. And that was my next mistake. I knew I needed to check the wall for cables and pipes. I had the tool to do it, but I forgot. Just next to the hole you can see a pipe. I've got no idea why a pipe would be there. Fortunately, I only just grazed the pipe, so there was nothing to worry about. However, this meant I have to shift everything to the right. This time, using the right tool for the job, I mapped out a drilling safe area and resume drilling. If you use a metal detector in order to find pipes and wires, don't put a metal object just on top of it, like your measuring tape, for instance. At that point, I moved the camera out of the room because this drilling was creating a significant amount of dust and I didn't want the camera to get any dirtier, which means that you didn't get to see the next two mistakes. I chased way too deep into the wall, so deep in fact that I poked a hole in the adjacent room. And that is because when you chisel away at the wall, you might have a tendency to do so at an angle. Since I made the mark so close to the back box, I didn't have a lot of wiggle room, so I assumed I needed to chase deeper, not realizing that I chased past the holes I made. That last part, I think, was because I didn't drill enough holes before starting to chisel, so the brick wouldn't naturally break apart at the expected depths. Anyway, no drama. I decided to make use of the unexpected hole through to the kitchen, as I needed one anyway, but its location meant that I had to alter my plans. I didn't have space anymore to put two double back boxes, So I went with one double for the network cable and one single for the potential satellite cable. But then I realized that even that would be tight, so I decided to abandon the future proofing altogether, as I'm very unlikely to ever subscribe to either satellite or cable TV. As I might want to or need to replace some cable, I want to have conduit running from the back box to the kitchen. I use 25mm conduit, which is the biggest diameter that will fit the knockout holes in the back boxes. It also just barely fits 4 Cat7 SFTP cables. Why Cat7, you ask? That's a story for another video, but the gist of it is that don't bother with shielded Cat7. I stuck with it because I already had the cable reel and it was too late to return it. Okay, back to the conduit. I needed a 90-degree bend in the conduit. You can do this for cheap with hot sand, but I didn't have any at hand, so I might as well use the correct tool, which is a bending spring. So when you're bending pipe, what you want to do is respect the bend radius, otherwise your pipe will collapse. Also, using the stove damaged the bending spring, and hand friction should provide enough heat to bend plastic. With all that figured out, it was time to get ready for plastering. People recommend to give the hole a coat of diluted PVA so that the plaster bonds better. To prepare the plaster, all I needed to do was to follow the instruction. Put some water, put the plaster on, and then mix until you get the required consistency. I'm not entirely sure what was the right consistency. I think my mix was a bit wet because it took a very long time to dry. I had to do this in 2 stages as I first needed to clean up my mess. I needed to put enough plaster to compensate for the over drilling so that I had something to fix the back box to. As you can see here, I've been struggling a bit to apply the plaster. I think that's because I didn't necessarily have the right trowel. So I went back to the shop and then get another trowel. Probably wasn't the right tool for the job either, but I made it work. As I applied the bonding plaster, I test fitted the back box to ensure that I wasn't overfilling. What I should have done at the same time was ensuring that the back box would be flush with the finished wall. It would have saved me some more chiseling. Once the plaster was set, I just needed to drill holes so that I could fix the back box into the wall. Once the back box and the pipe were in place, I was able to carry on with plastering so that everything would stay in place. I had to plaster on both sides of the wall because of the hole I made, but after that it was pretty simple. What I'm not showing in the video is that after placing the bonding plaster, I had to remove a little bit of material so that when I apply the finishing plaster, it gets flushed with the existing wall. At the end of the day, this box is solidly anchored into the wall and the cables are coming through just fine. I'm not worried about the plastering mess I made in the living room because the TV will be in front of it, and it's likely that the room will be professionally redecorated in a not so distant future. In the next video, I'll go through how I terminated those cables on either end and set up the network cabinet.